Before empires collapse, history repeatedly shows that there is usually some kind of signal, not a literal trumpet sounding in the sky or a mysterious voice echoing from the clouds, but rather a pattern that quietly begins to emerge across different places and different periods of time. A moment in history when warnings begin repeating themselves through separate nations, separate cultures, and separate generations, often carrying the same symbols, the same fears, and the same unsettling predictions that seem to echo through time. And according to ancient biblical texts, there would be one final signal appearing just before everything changes a signal. So subtle and so easy to dismiss that most people would simply ignore it without realizing its importance. Yet, once someone notices the pattern and connects the pieces, together it becomes impossible to unsee it, which raises a deeply unsettling question that echoes through history. The real issue may not be whether such a signal exists, but whether humanity might already be living through it right now without realizing it. For thousands of years, civilizations have looked toward the future with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and fascination. As ancient kings consulted prophets before making decisions about wars and alliances, powerful empires recorded unusual celestial events into stone tablets, as if they were messages from the heavens. And priests spent generations studying the skies because they believed history moved not in straight lines, but in cycles that repeated themselves over time. Yet the Bible introduced a radically different concept by suggesting that history followed a timeline rather than an endless loop, a sequence of events unfolding step by step across centuries. And within that timeline, the scriptures describe signals, markers that would begin appearing before major turning points in human history. Not vague predictions open to endless interpretation, but recognizable patterns such as wars increasing across regions, nations growing divided from within, knowledge expanding at unprecedented speed, power gradually concentrating into fewer hands, and perhaps most striking of all, a world slowly becoming more connected than anyone in the ancient world could have imagined. At the time these texts were written thousands of years ago, the idea of a globally connected civilization would have sounded almost impossible. Because messages moved at the speed of a person walking or riding an animal, news could take months or even years to travel across continents, and entire empires could rise and fall while much of the world remained completely unaware of what had happened. Yet the prophecy described a future moment when events happening in one place could influence the entire planet, when humanity would become part of a single, interconnected system, almost like a vast network linking distant societies together. And once that kind of global structure finally existed, the ancient texts suggested that the final signals described in prophecy could begin appearing, quietly revealing themselves through patterns unfolding across the world. One of the most discussed prophetic passages appears in the book of Daniel, a text written more than 2,500 years ago. It contains a short but mysterious line which historians, theologians, and researchers have debated for centuries because of how strangely relevant it seems today, as it says that near the end of a certain era many people will run to and fro across the earth, and knowledge will increase. A statement that for most of human history sounded symbolic or poetic, but in the modern age feels almost literal, because humans now travel across the planet in a matter of hours, while information spreads across the globe in seconds through invisible digital networks, with billions of people interacting every single day through technology that did not exist even a generation ago. Satellites orbiting high above the planet, while artificial intelligence processes unimaginable amounts of data, and financial markets react instantly to events happening thousands of kilometers away. Human civilization has therefore transformed into something completely new in the long story of history, becoming a single interconnected system rather than isolated regions evolving independently. And systems like this share one crucial characteristic that engineers and historians alike recognize. When they function well, they create extraordinary efficiency and power. But when they begin to break, the consequences can spread everywhere at once, because everything is linked together, meaning a disruption in one part of the network can ripple outward across continents and oceans, affecting billions of people who may not even know where the original disturbance began. But the prophecies did not only speak about technology or global systems, because they also describe changes in human behavior and social stability, warning about a world filled with confusion, division, and moral instability that would not be limited to conflicts between rival nations, but would also appear inside societies themselves, where distrust begins rising among populations. Institutions that once seemed stable start weakening, and truth becomes increasingly difficult for ordinary people to recognize in a landscape overwhelmed by competing narratives. And perhaps the most unsettling detail within these warnings is the idea that many individuals would feel that something in the world was deeply wrong, yet would struggle to understand exactly what was happening or why the sense of instability seemed to be growing. History repeatedly demonstrates that great transitions rarely unfold slowly enough for people to fully understand them while they are happening, because pressure tends to build quietly beneath the surface for years, or even decades, until one day the entire structure suddenly shifts, causing empires that once appeared permanent to disappear within a generation, currencies that people trusted to collapse rapidly, borders to change, and entire populations to wake up in a completely different world than the one they believed was stable only a short time before. And the ancient texts do not claim that the end of an era arrives gently or without disruption, but instead describe a convergence where multiple pressures begin building at the same time, including economic instability, political polarization, and technological disruption, each one manageable individually, yet potentially transformative when they occur simultaneously. Consider how many interconnected systems modern life now depends upon every single day, including vast energy grids, powering entire continents, digital communication networks that allow information to travel instantly, global trade routes carrying food and resources across oceans, and satellites guiding navigation systems used by aircraft, ships, and vehicles around the world. Systems that are undeniably powerful but also fragile because their complexity means a disruption in one area can quickly cascade into others, a reality already glimpsed in recent years through collapsing supply chains, financial markets reacting violently to geopolitical tensions, and information spreading across social networks faster than anyone can verify whether it is accurate or not. For the first time in human history, a crisis beginning in one region can influence billions of people across the planet almost instantly. Whereas in ancient times, a failed harvest might devastate only one kingdom or province, but today, a similar disruption can ripple through global markets, affecting prices, trade, and political decisions across continents, illustrating that the modern world has reached a level of advancement, interdependence, never before experienced by humanity, which means the opportunities are greater than ever before, but the vulnerabilities are also far more significant. Yet the most intriguing aspect of the ancient prophecies is that they rarely describe the final signal as a single dramatic event visible to everyone at the same moment, but instead portray it as a sequence of smaller signs emerging across different areas of life, including political shifts, technological leaps, and growing social instability, each development easy to dismiss when viewed alone, yet increasingly difficult to ignore when all of them begin appearing together, as if forming a larger pattern that remains almost invisible until someone steps back and observes the entire picture. History often shows that major discoveries follow a similar pattern, where scientists collect scattered pieces of information for years that initially seem unrelated or insignificant until one moment when the connections suddenly become clear and a hidden structure reveals itself, suggesting that historical transitions may operate in a similar way, where humanity may already be surrounded by signals such as economic systems shifting, artificial intelligence redefining the nature of labor and creativity, and global power balances gradually changing alongside perhaps the most profound transformation of all, which is the increasing power of information itself to shape how people perceive reality. For the first time in human history, perception can be influenced or engineered on a truly global scale, because narratives spread instantly through digital platforms, while public opinion moves like waves across entire societies, and decisions affecting millions of people can emerge from ideas that travel across networks faster than any traditional institution can respond, raising the possibility that in the modern world the most powerful force shaping the future may no longer be weapons or wealth alone, but information itself. This realization leads to one of the most unsettling questions that historians and observers of global patterns can ask, which is whether the final signal described in ancient texts might not be a physical event like a natural disaster or celestial sign, but instead a moment of recognition when humanity realizes that the systems it has built across the modern world are approaching their limits, because throughout history many civilizations have faced similar moments when structures that once seemed permanent suddenly revealed deep vulnerabilities. The Roman Empire eventually reached that moment despite its immense power and influence. The Soviet Union reached it after decades. As a global superpower, and numerous ancient empires experienced the same turning point, where internal pressures and external forces combined to reshape their futures. Yet from the perspective of people living inside those civilizations, the idea of collapse or transformation often appeared impossible. Until it happened, which is precisely why ancient warnings were written not to predict an exact date but to describe patterns that repeat across generations whenever a civilization approaches a major turning point. Those patterns serve as signals, indicating that history may be approaching a moment when the future becomes uncertain, and the direction of humanity can change dramatically, leaving modern society facing the reality that it lives in the most technologically advanced era ever experienced, while also navigating tensions and uncertainties that feel strangely familiar to those who study the past. Some observers look at the modern world and see chaos spreading through political systems and global markets, while others interpret the same developments as signs of transformation and progress toward a new stage of civilization. Yet the ancient text suggests something more subtle by reminding readers that before major change there is usually a signal, a shift in the structure of the world that quietly begins accelerating the pace of history, until later generations look back and realize they were witnessing the beginning of a turning point. Perhaps that signal has already appeared and humanity is only beginning to recognize it, or perhaps the most important signs are still ahead, waiting to emerge in the coming years. Yet history demonstrates that civilizations rarely understand their most critical moments while they are living through them, because the meaning of those events becomes clear only with the passage of time. But if this truly is one of those rare moments when history begins to shift and the trajectory of the world starts changing direction, then it is possible that the signal has already been transmitted quietly through the patterns unfolding across the modern age, leaving only one final question echoing across time: who is actually paying attention?